from a defabricated garden shed in Rockland County, New York, USA. This is Stand Up with Pete Dominic. On today's episode, the top 5 tips for turning your gender reveal party into a rip-roaring kegger. And now, the podcast host who skips the keggers because that corporate beer sponsorship is just around the corner, Pete Dominic!
Oh, yes, Pico, a lot to unpack in that intro. We'll have to get to those 5 steps on gender reveal parties after my interviews with both Maura Quint, who is just hilarious and brilliant as always today. And for the first time, writer, author, Professor Baynard Woods joins me. Fantastic, awesome, amazing new book that he has out. I'm very excited to introduce his work to you if you don't already know it. Inheritance, an autobiography on whiteness. Don't roll your eyes. It is so good. I'm very happy to have you joining me. I hope that you are doing okay. I am still trying to figure out where I want to go with some new ideas here on the podcast, but I'm going to continue to pump out 2 great guest interviews each and every day that will help you interpret what is going on in the world and in your life. That's at least one of the goals here on Stand Up, as well as building this amazing community of folks who are on the journey together with each other. So much to share with each other along the way, and you've been so generous and thoughtful with me, and I try to do just the same for you each and every day here in the podcast. What am I talking about? I don't know. It's Monday. Thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate you being here in mid-July. If you're listening then, I'm trying to make these podcasts, these interviews, a little bit more evergreen as well. Things that you can use now and whenever, and things that you can learn about now and forever. So I hope you like my conversations with both Maura and Baynard today. And if you do, maybe you'll consider signing up for a paid subscription if you haven't already for as little as $5. You can always pay more thanks to Hap Connors. I just saw old Hap raising his subscription very generously. Thanks, Hap. You're the best, and you have been with me for such a long time, and so many others as well. Sign up now at standupwithpete.com. Okay, well, I'm going to get right to those interviews I just told you about. And coming up, Baynard Woods. It's very special. I think you're going to like it a lot. A couple weeks ago, I talked to D. Watkins. Black Boy Smile is the name of his memoir. And Baynard Woods is got a new memoir as well. He's actually friends with D. They live down in the Baltimore area together. And you're just going to, I really think, love it. Both of these today. I'm very happy about both these interviews. And that's why I'm psyched to share them with you and hear what you think. Okay, but as always, I've got Maura on Mondays, Maura Mondays, if you will. Maura Quint, she is a writer, she is an activist, she is now with the Americans for Tax Fairness. She's been published in everything from The Onion to The New Yorker to everywhere else. Named one of the funniest Twitter handles in all of Twitter. On Twitter at Behind Your Back. If you haven't followed her, you are missing out. I had a great conversation with her, as I always do. So let's get to it right now. All right, there she is. Maura Quint is here. Did you know that you can super follow you now?
It's true. You can. I'm so sorry. I feel embarrassed by that.
I don't. I think that there's a few people on Twitter who I would pay for. You, Ellie Mistal, and...
Wait. Pause. You know you can. Now you're telling me you would, and yet you don't. So what's this?
Oh, no, I just figured it out. I'm going to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
You don't have to do that. Please don't do that.
No, I didn't realize it. Subscribe for $2.99 a month, and you can get, it's a way to support your favorite people on Twitter.
Please don't, though, because ultimately, I subscribe to your podcast, you do my super follower, and all we're really doing is giving the intermediary companies money. So we should not do that. You should just come over and give me $5 every so often.
Okay, fine.
Okay, good.
But if anybody else wants to super follow, I guess I didn't realize that was a thing, but I think it's good that it's a thing. I understand you don't want to give Twitter money, but you get money. I mean, what? I don't know what the split is, but anyway. I think that's good for a very few people, and you're massive on Twitter. Anyway, hi, how are you? Good to see you. You're doing a lot of productive things. You're doing yoga every day, and you've been swimming. Look at you. How's that going? Why are you doing that?
I was fighting against saying the worst possible reason I'm doing that, so I will go with a better reason, which is I need to be healthier. I'm not happy with my health at the current moment, so I'm trying desperately to throw myself into feeling better about myself on a daily basis. So it's been going all right. It's been going pretty well. It turns out yoga is, terrible, but you feel really good afterwards.
Oh, so you don't like it during? Is that the deal? And
I don't like anything during.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, wow, I was going to extend that out. I was going to say I don't like anything physical during, but then it got very sexual. But let's just say
you might not like sex during, and you definitely might not like it after during. If you don't like the person that's still there is like, ooh. Like,
if I don't like sex during, then a lot of things went wrong beforehand that I should be addressing that have nothing to do with yoga and swimming. They have to do with what's going on with you, Maura. Where have you sent it to? This is a bad place.
That's fair. Wow. I think everybody can relate to that. Okay, so and then also, why swimming? Or what does yoga do for you?
Well, yoga is like an attempt at so I can't meditate. I've tried meditating. I don't know if you have any.
That's what I'm going to bring up when we're done here. I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it. I don't know. Every time it's just even guided meditations, my mind doesn't stay on topic at all. Yeah. It's just a weird rant in my head. And at the end of it, I don't know. I'm just generally angrier for some reason. I guess that's a Twitter situation, but yoga, at least the ones I've been doing, you have to focus on your body and hold poses and move through them. And they are active enough that I can kind of let my mind be free for a moment without being be free, think of nothing, koans, meditate. As long as I'm not yelling at myself and instead going, oh, this hurts. This is bad. I can't do that. That's my meditation. My meditation is, what have you done to your body that this is so terrible? This shouldn't be so bad, but it's nice. It's calming.
So, a couple of people have been talking a lot about meditation recently because I feel like I've unlocked it. I've been doing it on and off for years, pretty consistently, but not that consistently, I should say. But I figured out how to do it differently to have it benefit me so much more. So here's my big new thought, and I wanted to throw it out to you in our conversation. Excited. I'm not criticizing therapy. I just think that people think too much about therapy or talking out their problems even with friends and not enough about a kind of Eastern philosophy, a kind of, as I call it, practice, as many people call it, because I have gone to therapy for years. I've done all kinds of self-help stuff, read all kinds of stuff, but I find myself falling back on old behaviors, bad habits, bad behaviors, and so on, because you learn a thing, you unlock a thing through therapy or any other way, and you're good for a while with it. But meditation, or as I call it, a practice, is you remind yourself every day. And so during my meditation, I say certain things that I want to be over and over, certain intentions that I want to set over and over. And it is working. I can't even believe it. I can't even believe how well it's working. It's just a matter of every day reminding yourself who you want to be, what you want to do, what your intentions are during your meditation. And I feel like I've broken through something. Now, you probably want to make fun of me.
I do. Of course I want to make fun of you, but you're also just right. No, I was telling someone that I was doing yoga and they yelled at me and they're like, you don't do yoga. Yoga is a practice. That's how they put it. And that's ultimately it. Oh, right. Yeah, you have to practice something. You have to train your mind and your body to be better than you were. No, I'm sorry. I would love to mock you. God, I'd love to mock you. Every part of my soul yearns to mock you. And the terrible element is I can't, because you're right. You're fucking right. It's awful. Pete, I hate saying that. I hate saying you're right.
What is right? What is registering?
What's right is that, any sort of transformation that it takes, whether it's emotional or physical or mental, takes a constancy of reminding, a constancy of practice. It is not, look, wouldn't we all just want to be able to be zapped with the better you, laser that's just and now you're just your body's great, your mind is great, you're just a wonderful evolved being. We all would love that goddamn laser. But it doesn't exist. Instead, it's you have to chip away at it every single day, and you have to constantly set your intention as to who it is you want to be for all of these areas. and you have to do a little bit more every day. And you have to trust in the fact that by doing it every day, you are growing towards that space. Oh my God, I hate myself. See what yoga has done to me? Do you hear how I'm speaking? It's terrible.
No, it's perfect. It's exactly what you need to be doing. And I can tell it's working for you. And meditation is definitely working for me. I do this thing where I meditate.
Oh my God, we're going to be so evolved, you and me. What are we going to do?
You just have to keep on it. And you have to allow yourself to be set back, and you have to allow yourself to make mistakes, and you have to forgive yourself. That's a lot. I'm making a lot of like discoveries, and I'm cringing at some of the things that I feel like I've done and said, reactions I've had, emotional reactions I've had, and I'm cringing at them, but I'm then forgiving them and moving on. And that's all happening like in the meditation and in the reading and writing that I'm doing, just reminding myself every day to work on me and to be a better me. And when I don't do that, I'm not nearly as good. And I'm also just trying to change like drastically my personality to be a calmer person. I'm going for Fred Rogers.
Are you? Have you hit Fred Rogers level? Do you have like a train set in your basement?
No, but I might get one, and I might just talk to it, and that'll be my thing. Yeah.
I think that's wonderful. I also think like before you hit the puppet stage, like, bring some other people in, because like a man by himself with puppets, it doesn't look good. I mean, I'm not saying it's not good. I'm just saying, ooh.
Jesus, I'm so uncomfortable that you just said that, because I was like just thinking, you know what I need more is like just puppets and me.
Just puppets, you and puppets.
Me just talking to puppets, and those puppets telling me what I want to hear.
I mean, that's kind of like having a podcast, isn't it? A little
bit. So what about you're also swimming? So that's you're taking on a lot. You're jumping in, literally.
Yeah, I'm not very good at moderate. Well, I'm actually fantastic at moderation. I'm so good at moderation. I'm the best at moderation. No, not at all. No, I have to when I get going on something, I kind of have to jump all in, or I'm afraid that I'll let it go. So swimming is basically the only sort of physical activity that I enjoy that is like, this is pleasant. I feel good right now. I'm not just doing it because I have to. I'm doing it because it brings me actual pleasure. So, it's summer. There's a pool not too far that I'm fortunate enough to be able to go to. So I'm just trying to take advantage of it. I'm just trying to do it. And it does feel great. I love it.
Do you wear a swim cap?
I do not wear a swim cap. My bathing costume does not include a swim cap.
You don't wear a swim cap?
No, I don't have nice hair. There's nothing to protect. No.
I guess I wasn't. I don't know. I was under the impression that it wasn't. It was like just about.
I haven't seen anyone in a swim cap in I don't even know how long. I feel like not since like maybe the 1930s, like the swimming movies, like the Follies situation.
Why are you wearing one right now? That's weird.
Well, it's a fashion statement. I think it looks interesting. I mean, the feathers are just extra, but I'm trying to do something here. How dare you mock me? Go meditate on that. That's
weird,
just rude.
Weird cultural appropriation with your feathered swim cap.
You can have feathers. You just can't have them in certain ways, but feathers in general allowed.
Can I tell people that the other thing that your future plans that you made in the state of Maine, or no?
Honestly, I can't wait to hear about my future plans because I've already forgotten them. So definitely, please remind me.
You're taking a week yoga retreat in the state of Maine in August.
A couple of days. Week would be, but yes, I am driving to Maine, to the middle of nowhere, Maine, and doing a yoga retreat. This was like a Hail Mary situation. This was just holy shit, things are going south, man. I don't know, figure something out. And I just Googled yoga retreats. And that's why I've been doing yoga now, is because I was like, all right, I booked myself a yoga retreat a month out. And then I went, oh, wait, I haven't done yoga in 2 years. Maybe I should do yoga first because I'm spending money to go somewhere and sit there and have people yell at me, or I don't know, or say in a very calm,
what kind of yoga
Zen voice. I don't know.
Yoga retreat are you going to? Get down, dog, right now.
That's what I need. I need yoga boot
camp. The Alex Jones of yoga. All right, I want you to sit there right now, cross your legs, think about demon frogs.
Fuck up and do it live. Come on. Yeah, that's what I need from yoga. But so I was like, all right, well, I don't want to embarrass myself completely. I should start doing yoga every single day. And in doing yoga now daily, I have recognized that whatever skills I ever had at being flexible or strong are completely gone. They're not just gone.
Yeah.
They're the muscles that maybe used to exist have beyond atrophied. Now it's just like a black hole where a muscle ever was.
You've been pretty public about your numerous injuries. Do you think maybe it's that you lacerated them out of yourself?
I wish. Then I could blame it on something. I think it's more just like, you're
like, why don't my feet work? I don't know. Maybe because you cut through the muscles on an empty vodka bottle. Oh, it was full. My bad. Too soon.
Yeah, it was absolutely full. It had never been opened. How dare you?
That was
I'm still mourning the loss of that vodka.
That was the worst part.
That was cruel. That was very cruel.
So, well, a lot of healthy choices, Maura. Good for you.
Did you see me right before now when I was like, hold on a second, I got to eat more Pringles? Because that's how this whole thing started.
Pringles aren't bad.
Okay, all right.
They're
just
baked.
Checking on those healthy choices situation. That's my dinner.
Well, have you changed your diet at all? And I mean, like, have you done, like, you're being kind of drastic, which I always think I worry about, like, you're jumping in, doing yoga every day and swimming minutes every day. And like,
I can promise you I've had pizza twice today.
Okay. Well, it's Sunday. But are you in general, did you make any choices about food?
No. So food is my hang up. Like that's where that's always where I focus things because I really struggle with food. And no, I'm not doing anything with food. I'm just like, you know what? No, that'll come later. If it comes, I'm just going to like try and make my body feel healthy. And then whatever goes into my body will be the like secondary element instead of leading with the like, no. You got to cut out everything and you got to
I think that's good actually, because I don't want you to, what am I saying? I don't want you to. Who the hell am I? But
no, it's nice. I felt very like, oh, please tell me. Please tell me what to do, Pete. Like, I would love for someone to.
The setback, the disappointment when you set goals and you commit to them and you're doing them and you're consistent and then something happens and you fall off and then you just get, I think, frustrated and set back and it's hard to get back to it. So, you never want to, I think, bite off more than you can chew with any of this.
Oh, now you're talking chewing? Wow, real nice, Pete. We were just talking food
you
and
never
you're
want to bite off
let me talk about food.
Too many slices. Favorite slice?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Your favorite slice?
New Haven, without question.
In New Haven, Connecticut?
Yeah, New Haven, Connecticut. I have spent a lot of time on this particular question. I have driven up to 10, 11 hours just to try a pizza place. I'm like very devoted to this particular question. And I'm not saying that like this is the answer and there will never change. But to this point of everything I have tried, New Haven pizza it reigns supreme.
That's a name of a place?
No, that's just the area. But Moderns, Pepe's,
wow,
those are my two favorites. Yeah.
All right. I'll have to look into it next time I'm up there. And anybody else.
Goodness, how have you not tried this, Pete? Oh my God.
I don't even know what you're talking about, and I've been up there many times. But yeah, sorry, I didn't realize Connecticut.
We have to do the next podcast from a pizzeria.
Oh, well, done. We'll jam tons of pizza in our mouth. I'm all for it.
I'm like, that's part of this like driving to Maine, yoga thing. I have literally structured it so that I will stop in New Haven and get pizza. Awesome. So you should come meet me.
That's awesome. Done.
All right, cool.
Okay, so let's talk about the news. There's lots going on in the news, and you are always good, probably one of the best people on Twitter and in America at making fun of filthy, dirty wealth, especially these billionaires. And Elon Musk in the news again this week for the whole Twitter deal. He's trying to get out of it. Twitter is suing him. They're trying to make him stay. We found out he has like 9 kids.
Right.
But what do you make of the fact that Elon Musk is pulling out the Twitter deal, and who made the joke first? Who was the first person to make the pulling out joke?
I have no idea who to attribute it to because like 1 billion people did it. In fact, like if you counted up all of Elon Musk's money, that's how many people have done it, that particular pulling out joke. But good for them because it's a fantastic joke. However, the problem is, it implies Elon ever wanted to be in the first place, which he didn't. He didn't care. He just likes, getting attention. There's something wrong with this dude completely.
Oh my God, there's so many things wrong.
Well, yeah. Why did I limit that? There's something wrong. There's one thing wrong with him. The thing that is wrong with him is that he was born. And if his dad had pulled out, now we'd be in a better place.
Maura.
What?
Too far.
No such thing.
Did you predict this was going to happen? What does it mean?
I actually did think this was going to, I don't know if I like publicly predicted it. Because, Twitter's just hot takes all the time. And I try not to actually indulge the hot takes too much because it's like, I don't know. It always makes me feel like there should be like odds riding on everything and I should be investing in some sort of Vegas situation. But I did actually expect that this is what was going to happen with him. There was going to be some big drama and he wasn't going to necessarily see it through because that's his whole deal. He just desperately wants attention so badly, and he'll do whatever he can to get it. And this is a little bout. He got a lot of attention. People are really excited. They're very interested. They're hanging on his every word. They weren't hanging on his every word before this Twitter thing. He
is that right? Is that, yeah, I think
they really weren't. They cared because he's a billionaire. So everything a billionaire says is worth like a billion times what any of the rest of us say. So it's not like he didn't care at all, but he didn't have us all so wrapped in his goddamn hand to have to be like, Musk has spoken. Let's elevate or denigrate it. We didn't do that before.
I think probably because we gave him so much. I mean, we're feared that he would have so much more power if he owned Twitter, and people really did start to pay a lot more attention because what was he going to change? That's a good point. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, he's still a tremendously powerful person, and he's powerful because he has money, which at this point equals power. And he holds a huge amount of power, and it is absolutely infuriating. I mean, I think you saw, like, if he split up his money between his 9 children, half of whom won't speak to him or whatever, they would still be among the 60 most wealthy people in the entire world. It's an insane level of wealth.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a crazy statistic. If you split up his money between his 9 kids is also a crazy statistic.
It is. Yeah, no, there's something wrong with this dude. And the other thing wrong as well is that he gets lauded by these sort of right-wing sects that are just like, look at what this is amazing.
Oh, wait, which was the tweet?
Dad.
Which tweet did you really get attacked for? Was it the Kavanaugh stuff this week, or was it
Yeah, my Kavanaugh tweet was...
Well, let me just stay on that one more, Elon, for one more second, because I tweeted something about him, and I got attacked, and I was on TV the other night, and I said something about him, and I got attacked, and I'm like, who are the people that like Elon Musk, Maura? Who are they really? I mean, I really don't know. Are they kind of, I don't know who they are, but they really defend him, and it's very weird because he's such an unlikable dirtbag of a person. He's just not a good guy, and in so many ways.
Yeah, but he gets held up as this sort of avatar for a lot of things. So he's held up as an avatar of like, here's what technology can bring. If you just work really hard in technology in some way, you will become this incredibly wealthy figure. And then there is a whole sect of right-wing Christianity, maybe particular sects of Christianity, certainly, but there's a whole area where wealth equals value, and it gets put into this weird sort of like godly place where the higher you have it wealth, the more that you are valued as a person because you have done something to earn that wealth. And the earn becomes very moralistic, and like that must mean the more dollars you have must mean the more good you are, the closer to God you are, like all of the absolute reverse of what the Bible says. But people, Americans in particular, we have chosen this sort of path of believing that like being rich means being good.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot, even for people who don't necessarily believe that outright. It takes a lot to untangle that as sort of a subconscious thing that is driving a lot of thought. There is still this like feeling of like, well, they must have done something, right? Like they must be smart in some way we can't comprehend. They must be really good somehow. There's this like story that we get told and that we tell ourselves that really, no, they must have earned it somehow, as opposed to like, no, they're evil and lucky. And those two things combined allowed them to exploit a lot of people at the right time and the right way. Like it's not actually more than that. Maybe it can be. Maybe there's someone out there who's just, they really did something so phenomenal. But most of those people who really had tremendous moral compasses, who were doing something really good, they generally have just sort of given those things to the world and did not profit off of them. Anytime you look at someone who really actually engineered something fantastic that truly moved our society forward, it is a rare situation that they actually benefited from it. More often than not, they, when you're actually talking about a good person, they recognized the value or they got exploited, one or the other.
Yeah. So well said. I hate the word success being so connected to wealth, because nobody ever says, wow, he was a really successful nurse. She was a really successful teacher. She taught in the public schools for 30 years. She was so successful at that. How many kids' lives she changed? You just don't hear that. I was together with a bunch of my buddies, as you know, I think a few weeks ago, a bunch of high school buddies of mine, and people talk about how successful one of my buddies is because he's made so much money. And I'm like, right. You should, if you want to talk about success, you should be talking about me, because I made a living in industries and careers that nobody makes a living in. But you don't do that because I'm not a millionaire. And so it's just a weird thing, the way that we attach success to money. And more importantly, you say, oh, he worked really hard. Oh, really? You don't think the guy that made, a lot less money, the woman that makes so much less money doing some really hard job, is working as hard as the super wealthy financier?
The people who are scraping by, working multiple jobs, are working harder than any CEO has ever worked in their entire lives. Yep. And the thing is, too, I mean, the frustrating element is so many people really do recognize that when you put it in their face. Like, what was harder for you when you started out in a really hard way? Was it harder for you when you were mopping floors, or was it harder for you when you were a VP? Like, it was harder mopping floors. That was a harder job.
Nothing's harder than being poor. Nothing's harder than worrying about if you can cover your child if they get sick with health insurance. Nothing's harder.
Yeah.
Nothing.
It takes a huge amount out of you. And then when you talk about success, I mean, like, you're even still talking about sort of success as you're still coming from the capitalist perspective. I mean, it's a bummer that we don't say, like, this person was a tremendously successful person. Why? Because they figured out how to love and be loved in a way that was like, putting something good into the world. They cared for others and they were cared for by others. Like, it's a bummer that that's not how we identify success in my hippie brain. Now that I've been doing yoga, I'm a hippie. It's like 5 seconds.
I love that. To love and be loved as a definition of success. I got pretty moved by that just now.
Yeah.
Okay, well, how about this? Let's talk about something different. Justice Brett Kavanaugh had to exit through the rear of Morton's steak. Have you ever been to Morton's? Oh, it's good.
I have been to a Morton's, like years and years ago. I'm not a steak person, but I was there for some reason. I don't know why.
And on Wednesday night in D.C., he had to exit through the rear of the restaurant after protesters showed up out front. A Morton's rep said to, is this Politico? Politics should not trample the freedom at the play of the right to congregate and eat dinner. You have a lot of thoughts about this strategy of protesting a Morton's steakhouse while Justice Kavanaugh is inside eating. What are those thoughts?
I have so many thoughts. Do I get like 3 hours for this, or how long are we going to go?
Well, you definitely, I can tell you, you feel very strongly about this. There's an organization, or I don't know, what they're called, Shut Down DC. I'm not familiar with them, but you're sharing a lot from them. I just followed them on Twitter. An organizing space where individuals and groups can come together to organize direct action in the fight for justice. I don't know anything about it, but shutdowndc.org. Go ahead.
Shutdown DC was part of the Morton's action. They had a tip come through another organization whose name I can't remember at this exact moment, but I can find it for anyone interested. And they were able to call upon their members to say, hey, Brett Kavanaugh's here. You can come congregate, which is what they do. They do rapid action, immediate, like in-person actions, which I think are incredibly valuable. Fundamentally, I mean, there's a lot of belief that we should be sort of appealing to the better angels of people. If we just have the right conversation with them, they will change their minds. They will see the way. They will become better people. And at this point in time, that may be true for very specific individuals. It may be that if you just keep talking to your aunt over the course of the next 5 to 10 years, she will start to understand what you're saying and she will change her ways. I'm not saying that that's not possible. It's completely possible on an individual basis. But when we're talking broadly, there's not actually like an argument to be made that somehow if we just speak to the sort of, ultra right wing, I don't know why I phrase it like that, because ultra right wing now is just mainstream right wing. If we speak to them in a certain way, they'll be like, I get it now. I see. You've out debated me, sir. I shall change my position accordingly. Like, that's not happening.
Right.
So what can we do? And part of it is that so much of what a lot of these people want is to be seen in good standing in society. And it upsets them when they're not. The more people who are kind of calling them out, who are mocking them, who are making their life just generally unpleasant is a good thing. Maybe not for them. I'm not saying, oh, goodness, everybody's going to change Brett Kavanaugh's mind. If you follow him around every place he gets a bagel or he rapes someone or whatever, he'll finally stop doing that. I'm not saying that's going to happen.
I hate that you made that joke and that I laughed so hard at your rape joke. Like, I didn't. It's one of those things where comedy is comedy. That was a rape joke. I didn't want to laugh at it. I might delete it, but I'm not going to.
Well, anyway, you can follow him to every stupid beer he has. I'm not saying he'll change his mind, but what you do eventually have, when you have enough of a public making the life hell for these fucking assholes, what you do is you start to deter others from becoming those assholes because they don't want that. They start to hesitate before they do things because they don't want that fucking heat. They don't want that mob coming at them. It can change things. And unfortunately, I think that's where we are in society. I don't think that, you can just out-argue Tucker Carlson. I think that these people need to be made to feel uncomfortable. And I think other people need to see that they are being made to feel uncomfortable. That if you're eating your steak, someone could yell in your face, which is not even what happened. I mean, supposedly Brett Kavanaugh didn't even hear the protesters. He had a very nice dinner. He just got scared because he's a little fucking pussy baby. But beyond that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no, he had to slip out the back. This didn't affect him at all, but he's just such a fucking little crybaby piece of shit that he still had to slip out the back. Anyway, when these people are made to feel uncomfortable, other people feel less safe behaving the same way. And that is valuable. And so, I posted it out there. And the other element I would say is that I think a lot of us are kind of at this place where we feel all the time what can I do? I am just one man. We're kind of in this place of being uncertain what actions to take, feeling very frustrated, feeling very lost. And I think Shutdown DC has created a tremendously great model for how to organize and how to activate the people around you in these really very specific. It's all very peaceful, I will also say, tremendously peaceful. There's no violence to any of this. It is peaceful, lawful organizing. But it is peaceful, lawful organizing that is happening at a consistent basis. And it was really wonderful. I actually DM'd Shutdown when I saw this happen. I wasn't all that familiar with stuff. I knew them a little bit, but I said, hey, were you guys part of this action? Can I share this, broadly? Are you cool with that? And they were the ones who said to me, yes, thank you. Please do. Also, please feel free to let people know we're a trading organization. We can help them start their own types of organizations like this in their city. So that's what I shared, and that pissed Tucker Carlson off because he put it on his show.
Maura, the whole Kavanaugh thing.
Yeah, my tweet, Shutdown's tweet.
He put your tweet on. He put your tweet up.
Yep, he did. Yeah, so I've been inundated with these crazy right-wing psychos for a day and a half straight. Yeah, I've just been blocking like crazy.
Tucker Carlson posted your tweet on his show with under your name.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh my God, you didn't tell me that. So what has been the reaction there?
Oh, it's just been a flood. He basically said send them false tips. So it's been a flood mostly of false tips. I've certainly gotten some DMs and responses calling me a whore and a baby killer. I had the...
Are you either?
A whore or a baby killer?
Yeah.
I mean, what's your definition of either of those things, really? I had eggs for breakfast. I don't know. What kind of baby are we talking about here? From a chicken's perspective, absolutely. I definitely am. There's a lot of possibilities there. It's not for me to say. I would hate to label myself. I'll let others decide.
Remember when I was getting attacked on Twitter and you were like, you're the biggest pussy in the world. Let me take your Twitter account and go have a nice weekend with your family. Remember that? I remember that.
You were a sweetheart because you hadn't been through it and just, I've been through it. So you just block. You just stay on top of it and you block everyone. But the nice thing is I have my email in my bio too, which hasn't yielded too much, but I did get attorney of Council Bluffs, Iowa, who was really mad that I was blocking people and called me a fascist because I was blocking people on Twitter, which doesn't make me feel good about the law practices of Council Bluffs, Iowa, if he does not understand what leads to these.
It's interesting because you have the reason he did that, and the reason people are reacting because you really do have a big following, and it's when people are effective and when people speak up that they try to shut you down. And that's true of all sides or whatever. But what about just the idea with the Brett Kavanaugh thing that, he voted to overturn a woman's right to an abortion. So, I'm just seeing that this is the most common response. So what's the big deal making him uncomfortable at a rich person's restaurant? Like, really?
Well, it's more than that. Overturning Roe v. Wade. Roe v. Wade was fundamentally prefaced on the idea of the right to. Kavanaugh absolutely threw out the idea of privacy. So the idea that he should now have privacy is a particularly sort of ironic element. Like women don't have the rights to privacy of their own body, and you think you should be allowed to privately have a dinner in a public restaurant? Go fuck yourself.
So you think you should have the rights to privacy to your own body? That's what I'm hearing.
I do tend to think that, yeah. I do. That tends to be one of those things. I tend to think, yeah, if there's something in my body, I think I should be able to do what I want to it, basically.
Even if a yoga teacher is yelling at you what to do with your body, you still think you're in charge.
Well, I paid for that. So, I mean, that's just a service, God damn it.
All right.
That's what I'm asking for.
Finally, I want to ask you the stupid question that I'm hearing being asked, but I don't know. I'll spend 1 minute on it with you or anybody in an interview. Should Joe Biden run again?
Oh, no, I think would be my answer. Real quick, no. Just a real straightforward one there. 2 letters. Absolutely no. No, I'm not pleased. I'm not excited by a Joe Biden return. And I don't think I'm alone in that. It seems like a lot of people agree. They're not super excited by Joe Biden, and we need somebody else in there who's going to be more visible, be more vocal, and take more action. He's a little disappointing.
Is there anybody you like?
No.
I meant in general, not for president.
Oh shit. No. Also still no, unfortunately. No, I mean, there's no one like, I'm not horse racing this. I'm not sitting here being like, here's who I'm putting my money on. Yeah. No, there's no one that's coming to like, wow, that's the person. I was going to say that's the guy. I was like, well, fuck.
Would you hook up with Gavin Newsom? I would.
Somebody else recently was like, I hate him, but he's really hot. And I thought in my head, I got to look up what Gavin Newsom looks like. And then I got distracted by other things. So I'm not sure. Is he hot?
Oh, yeah. I think he's really, he's classically handsome. I don't know what he
looks like.
Classically handsome. Yeah, I think so.
I probably wouldn't still, though, just because
right.
I don't know.
Whatever.
Maybe because I'm not a whore, Pete.
Well,
maybe.
I mean, I am.
Maybe.
I am for men, but not for women. Whatever. Okay. You're done.
Yeah. I'm going to go look up Gavin Newsom and see if I need to touch myself. All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
Too late for me. Ooh, Gav.
Oh, God. Ew, that's a weird... That's a real problem. You can't say that. Gav. Right. Gavin. That's a terrible name.
You can't say...
out.
You can't say... Out. Yeah, fair enough. Oh, Gavin. Ugh.
No, that's gross. Oh, that's gross.
Oh, Gav. Hey, Gav. Give it to me, Gav.
Oh, God.
Sorry.
Oh, this is really bad. Yeah.
So sorry.
Thank you. Now I have a nightmare. That's all right.
All right. Enjoy sleeping. Thank you for talking to me.
Bye.
All right. There you go. Maura Quint. So good. So funny. So brilliant. Always on top of it. And she was on tonight. How about it? Or today or whenever you're listening. I like to pretend it happened just now while you were listening. Go follow her on Twitter @BehindYourBack. Hey, give her a super follow if you want and let her know. Just stir it up on Twitter. She's always so much fun. She'll get back to you. Love Maura Quint @BehindYourBack on Twitter. Check her out there. And now it's time to get to my second guest. Like I said at the top, very special, very interesting. I'm going to read about his new book, Inheritance, an autobiography of whiteness, to introduce it. But it says, Baynard Woods thought he had escaped the backwards ways of South Carolina he grew up in, a world defined by country music, NASCAR, and the Confederacy. He'd fled the South long ago, transforming himself into a politically left-leaning writer and educator. Then, he was accused of discriminating against a black student at a local university. How could I be racist? He wondered. Whiteness was a problem, but it wasn't really his problem. He taught him at a majority black school and wrote essays about education and civil rights, but it was his problem. Working as a reporter, it became clear that white supremacy was tearing the country apart when a white kid from his hometown massacred 9 people in Charleston. Woods began to delve into his family's history and the ways that history had affected his own life. When he discovered that his family, both the Baynards and the Woodses, collectively claimed ownership of more than 700 people in 1860, Woods realized his own name was a Confederate monument. Along with his name, he had inherited privilege, wealth, and all of the lies that his ancestors passed down through the generations. In this gripping and perceptive memoir, Woods takes us along this journey to understand how race has impacted his life. Unflinching, uninhibited, Inheritance explores what it means to reckon with whiteness in America today and what it might mean to begin to repair the past. I'm telling you, this book is so good, and so, I think, is this interview. So let's do it now. Baynard Woods on Twitter, at Baynard Woods, BaynardWoods.net. Go get the book right now. You will not be sorry you read it. It's a great summer read, too. Great memoir, as was Black Boy Smile by D. Watkins. Let's go right now, for the first time ever, with Baynard Woods. Baynard Woods, welcome to Stand Up. Really excited to have you joining me.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Pete. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, this book is so good, and I'm really excited to talk about it. But before we get into the book, I thought maybe I could just talk about, because it's so relevant, the Supreme Court. And you wrote this great piece for NBC News. I probably should have told you I wanted to, or for MSNBC, talk about this. But you basically are talking about and describing this quarter, at least the philosophy of originalism, as white supremacy. And this is a great article. I'll share it in the show notes. Would you mind just telling me a little bit about your thoughts and what you wrote about these recent judgments and the current makeup of the court?
Yeah, and it really came out of this book. In researching the book, originally I wrote a draft that was much more theoretical and less emotional. And, you know, looking back at the founding of this country, it's just horrifying when you look at the actual arguments and the actual thoughts that these people had that maybe didn't make it into the final draft, but that the originalists are relying on in order to interpret the final draft.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's this selective process where they say, well, we don't have to be accountable for that, because once the 13th Amendment came and slavery was abolished, that's not part of the Constitution anymore. We don't have to think about their thoughts on slavery. But it's impossible to separate someone like Charles Pinckney, who grew up on a plantation, thought he owned people, was raised in a house that thought that it owned people, and was raised in a lap of luxury while surrounded by a concentration camp. Like, you can't separate his thoughts about slavery from any of his other thoughts about politics, because they suffused his being to such an extent. And so looking at the way that that's playing out now, we see the white supremacy at work. And you know, you had Jeff Charlotte on recently, a great writer whose work I love. And I think he really hit at that a lot in that conversation about how white supremacy can be welcoming in to people who aren't white, who are willing to get behind the ideology. Yes. We see that with Clarence Thomas on the court being the most staunch of all of the originalists.
Yes, I think it's such an important detail to mention. White supremacy is upheld by a lot of non-white people too often. Charles Pinckney, of course, I knew who you were referring to, but in case people don't know, he was a founding father. He was a former governor of South Carolina. He was a signer of the United States Constitution, and from the context of what you said, with the concentration camp, had his own slaves. And I just wanted to give some background on that, because we're not all the historians that we need to probably be. I always think that's the most important thing to understand white supremacy in America, is to understand history. No, Baynard? I mean, it's a really important part of your new book. You look at the history of your own family.
Yeah, I originally wanted to do this book that would go from Pitchfork Ben Tillman, who was became a U.S. Senator, was one of the people who overthrew the Reconstruction regime in South Carolina by stealing votes, intimidating voters, claiming that they won an election, and storming the Capitol, the South Carolina state Capitol, in 1877, and taking over the governorship that they didn't win. So there are obvious parallels in what was happening now. And so I wanted to trace, and this was before January 6th when I was originally thinking about this, but a book that went from Tillman to Trump, and looked at the way that this ideology was passed down. Tillman ran a militia group called the Red Shirts, and, you know, Trump with the red hats and all of that. It seemed too easy to trace. And so I spent a lot of time going to archives and looking into history, but I really wanted to find out about my family's own history as well. And that then led to the project of, well, it's still easy, even though plenty of people seem to find it hard to condemn one's ancestors, but to figure out how their white supremacy, their crimes, their white supremacist crimes, and the cover-up of those crimes created my own identity and my own way of thinking and way I moved throughout the world in my life. That was a harder project and a more emotional project. And so I really, but I wouldn't have ever been able to get to that emotional part without doing the historical research and spending a lot of time in the archives and really figuring out what happened.
I think it's interesting that you and I are maybe around the same age. I was born in 1975. I think I might be a little older than you, but the reason I think that we're around the same age is because in reading your amazing new book, I related to a lot of the references that you make in the book from the 80s, A, and B, I wanted to wait till we were talking and recording. I want you to know that I, too, was a huge skateboarder, and so it really resonated with me. But but there is also a huge difference in that we were both white guys, and we grew up around the same time in America, but definitely in two different Americas. And I'm certainly not saying that I didn't grow up with and around all the ignorance, bigotry, and racism, that a lot of that, but in rural upstate New York. But it was definitely different, certainly in my family's history, than yours. Tell me about where you grew up and where your family's from.
Yeah, so I grew up right outside of Columbia, South Carolina, until I was about 13, and we then moved to Greenville, South Carolina. But and I'm a couple of years older than you. I was born in 72.
Oh, okay.
And Columbia, was one of the birthplaces of secession. It was burned by Sherman, and there was this sense my whole life growing up that this arrogant, angry, embittered defeatedness suffused so many of the white people, including my family, in the area. I remember one of my earliest memories was we were at the State House and there were these stars on the dome where Confederate cannons hit it. And there's a statue of George Washington and a cane is broken. And my mom told me a story, which I've later learned she was reading off of the plinth, that said that the Union soldiers that came through, that they threw bricks. They hated the father of the country and freedom so much that they threw bricks at George Washington. And it really is a different world than New York, upstate New York, especially at that time. It was, and there was this weird sense of the Confederate rebellion being mixed in popular culture with the hippie sort of rebellion. So Dukes of Hazzard, Burt Reynolds, and all of the Smokey and the Bandit movies, where the cops were dumb, bumbling bad guys, which I appreciated, but also they had rebel flags on their cars and stuff. And so I grew up really suffused with that and with country music and NASCAR. My dad was a huge NASCAR guy, but then I started skateboarding, and that really was the first time I found a world outside of that, a sense of identity outside of that. And it really even shaped and changed the way that my body was and the way that I moved through that world. Yeah. So as the book opens, we're going downtown to skateboard at the state capitol there. Yeah.
Yeah, a bit about that for people who don't understand it, and you can take the ball here. But part of skateboarding then and probably now is if you go out in the street, you want to find a city, an urban area because of all the cement and structures and so on. But if you go and you skateboard in those places, you can get in trouble with the police because it's definitely against the law, because it's definitely dangerous and you can hurt people on your skateboard. But that's what we did. And so we would be chased by the police all the time. And it was literally a mantra within the skateboarding community for all across the country at that time. They were just very anti-police because they would always chase you out of the city. And then you had the music that often went with skateboarding and all of the rhetoric and lyrics that came with that kind of punk music. How much of that instructed you in terms of your relationship with law enforcement as a young skate rat, as we called ourselves?
Tremendously. It just completely eroded any respect I had for law enforcement, which was continued as I started getting arrested for smoking weed, and during the sort of Bush era drug war, first Bush. And, but it also did this, as a white guy, it did this fucked up thing to me where I thought, as a skateboard rebel, that I understood what other oppressed people were going through and whatever. And I was this suburban kid coming down to, but I did realize that what the police, you said, that it was definitely dangerous, and it was, we could have hurt people. but they were protecting property the same way that they do whenever there's an uprising, the same way they do by keeping Baltimore an apartheid sort of city. The purpose of police has always been to protect property. And I think that message hit us really early. And we would call people fascist pigs. So we would, some skating taught me those terms that have become dangerously relevant now, but those were the sort of terminology that we used back in those days.
Now I remember it. I mean, I had a sticker. It said skateboarding is not a crime. That was
exactly.
That was the feeling that we got. And, I'm just now all I want to talk about skateboarding and solve society's problems then. But it's like we might have been skateboarding less in the city if the community would have built us an awesome skate park, which have been built and subsequently, but they certainly weren't around when we were young. We built half pipes in our own yard. So I don't know. But later on,
we would dig out the parks that had been filled in from the 70s that we were right in that in-between skate. And so there's one in Myrtle Beach that people would go dig the sand out of the old park and try to skate.
Oh, wow.
Well,
that's also probably also a crime, digging the sand out of an old property. In the book, you illustrate so much about your own kind of privilege, and yet I think you do a great job to explain. I think in a way, I wonder, it'll be interesting to see how people of color will receive this book, because and how they already have and what they think about it, because you're giving this such a unique and honest perspective about your own whiteness. So let's you write a lot about this and so well and so eloquently, and let's talk about how you define that. But you write in the book, if you wouldn't mind me reading, whiteness is the belief that the freedom of white people is more important than the safety of people who are not white. It is the freedom to deny race even as you use it. You have these ideas and theories and philosophies that you certainly have developed about whiteness, which is a kind of a newer, I think, idea, or maybe not. But you also illustrate them with anecdotes from your own life throughout the book, which is why I think I'm happy you rewrote it that way. So talk to me about whiteness and how you actually use real life to explain it to us.
Yeah, I realized at some point that it was too easy to situate, even when we talk about structural racism, it's really a useful concept, but it often can let white people like us off the hook. Well, sure. It's something that's outside, and it's also easy to look to the past, to other political structures, but to look at the way that it intersects with the people that we love. That's the real problem is that it's the people who created the world for us, our parents, our grandparents, people who passed the past down to us. And how do we feel love for those people while also trying to free them from this ideology that they've been unaware of possessing their whole lives? And so one of the ways I thought of whiteness is that just like our skin is the place where that's like part world and part body. It's where we come into contact with the world. Whiteness is where our mental state comes into contact with power, and it intersects all of these levels with all these levels of power. And sort of like Stokely Carmichael has that passage, or Kwame Ture, where when you look at a white man, you see a whole army and navy and stuff standing behind him, and you look at a black man and you see nothing standing behind him. And so I was trying to look at where that army and navy and all of that stuff formed my own life without me being aware of it. And it's funny, I mean, my editor is black, and so she was the one that eventually said, listen, this is all from the outside. It's good, but anyone could have written it. I wanted to know what it feels like to be white right now. And my other early reader was D. Watkins, who you had on a couple of weeks ago, talking about his great book, Black Boy Smile. And we have the same editor, and so we were trading manuscripts back and forth. So eventually we were like, we need to find some white sensitivity readers and figure out how white people are going to respond to this, because I was the only white person who had read it for a very long part of its being.
You were the only one who had read which one, yours or his?
So I was the only white person who had read my own book until we finally reached this point where, man, Dee read it, Krishan read it, and I'm like, okay, I got to get my wife to read it. I got to get Brandon, my co-author, on another book, to read it and make sure that it's not inaccurate to white people in some way.
Oh, it's so good. I'm here to tell you, as a white guy who's been just eating it up. I'm loving it for so many different reasons. I can so relate to many of the experiences that you write about that resonated in your life that you had, and how you internalized them and how you interpreted them and how you matured. This is definitely a book for white folks of a certain age, I think, too, our age-ish, because you talk so much about your dad. And like you said earlier, your grandfather and his grandfather and where you came from. But we have to break so much of the thinking. But how do you learn that you're even thinking that? How did you write a lot about your dad. The book starts and ends with it. Talk to me about your dad and your relationship with him, and why, it eventually obviously gets complicated because of these racial and political issues. Yeah,
it was a really intense thing to write it because he was dying of ALS as I was writing the book. And that was part of how
horrible.
When my editor was like, you really need to write this emotional version, I happened to be overwhelmed with emotion. And it allowed me to undercut my rational mind a little bit, and all of the rationalizations where I wanted to explain away, where I wanted to make myself look good, where, writing about corrupt cops, you deal with all kinds of liars, but the worst liar in dealing with whiteness is in your own head. And I kept wanting to justify myself. So it was that emotion and focusing on him that allowed me to really sort of circumvent some of that intellectual defense system that I have and get to the heart of the world I had really inherited from him, and then tracing back what he had inherited.
That's so important for, I think, all of us to try to do. It's so painful, though, to think about your own family members who you love and who love you more than anything, having these views. And unfortunately, so many of us can relate to them. Talk to me about some of the, if you want to share some of the specific, clashes or incidents or problems you had with your dad. You write about him so well. And it's the kind of thing, Baynard, where you're doing an interview and you just want to be like, just read the book, because you can't do it justice in a conversation, but give it a shot.
Yeah. So when the book starts, he's like the ultimate company man. He just loves this company that insurance company that he worked for. He had 5 brothers. They grew up in the small town, Clarendon County. And all the brothers went to college, but him. And so he really had this sense of this company was he rose from being an adjuster up to being a vice president. And that's the moment the book opens. And he's just so proud. And he'd say the only permanent things in life are God and Siebel's Bruce, which is the name of the company. And, so we go, and my friend and I go and skateboard with him downtown, and riding back as we come down.
Well, hold on one second. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but one of the things that he said is fucking so bizarre and shows you exactly what kind of company man he was at one point you thanked him for something he bought you, and he was like, don't thank me, thank Siebel. So I was like, what the
and
crazy.
And as it turns out later, as I discover later in the book, that Siebel's family was a big South Carolina slaveholding family that's where that company money had come from the start. But yeah, so he loved this company, and he takes us downtown, and we go skateboard at the Capitol. And riding back, there was a black man walking across the road, and my dad casually called him a bear. And it was something that I'd heard in my life. And my mom's response later struck me as, she wasn't in the car that day, but normally she would sort of slap him on the shoulder and say, John, that's not polite. And so 2 things were communicated. His initial thing, that it was a dehumanizing analogy that he was making, calling a person by the name of an animal, just a racist slur that he thought was better. He thought was good because it wasn't the racist slurs he'd grown up around. And then my mom sensed that race was just a matter of manners. It's just, we don't talk like that because we're elevated above where you were when you were a kid. And thinking about that made me realize how complicated it was for them to have grown up as the recipients of this apartheid regime at the point that it was being overthrown by the Civil Rights Act, and to have had every door that they walked in all their lives in a public space say white above it, or whites only, or whatever. And then suddenly they just didn't talk about it ever again.
Yeah.
And that fucked up their heads. And that fucked upness passed on to us, as they said, in our generation, it's just like, oh, we just don't talk about race at all. We don't see race. But of course we did see it, and it was everywhere around us. So you end up being confused and screwed up. And My dad eventually became a Trumper. Both of my parents, my mom's a very staunch evangelical. And so, she was the Jesus will rise again. And my dad was sort of the South will rise again. And they were both, instead of, it should have been never again, like the Germans have. But I was raised on this South will rise again mantra that softened until a little over time, until as Trump came around, he became increasingly Trumpy. And we had our final big political argument right after January 6th. But it was weird because he would go with me as I was researching the family's history, researching old slave records, ads that our family had put out, trying to seek, people who had run away from them. And he would go along on these trips with me and was very interested in what I was finding out, but it wasn't changing him.
But it was changing you.
It was tremendously.
Yeah. Tell me about a moment. Yeah, I think you share a few at least, where I feel a lot of us can relate to, where your dad said something racist, if not bigoted, or if not ignorant, and a friend of yours was present. We've all kind of had that, not we've all, but most white folks have had that experience, certainly our age, where one of their parents says something in front of your friends, who might not be quite as ignorant, much less bigoted, much less racist, whatever word you want to use. But there was certainly the case with a friend of yours who came from a different part of the country and had a bit of a different interpretation of history than the one that you taught. Did your dad make those comments in front of your friends? It always feels great.
Yeah. So that's, when we were skating at the Capitol, I said something about we're the true rebels. They don't deserve to fly a rebel flag. And my friend from West Virginia, Chuck, was like, that's not what that's about, dude. And, we were taught this in West Virginia. And then that was on the way home when my dad used that slur. And, it puts you in this weird situation of navigating your own response, because I was on the one hand thinking, well, did he even hear what my dad said? I don't want to draw attention to it if he didn't hear it. Do I want to make it what do I say? Do I let it go? And that was mirrored later when I was in the archive with my dad. We went to the Clarendon County Archive in his old hometown of Manning, and the archivist was a younger black woman, and I'm there with my 76-year-old white Trumpist dad, and we find a genealogical record that at the top reads Dr. Woods plus maiden slave. And it has generations of a black family descended from my dad's grandfather, from my great-grandfather. And as I was calculating my own response, at this point, this was in February of 2020. And so at this point, I was aware, and I was trying to really calculate what my own responses were. I kept triangulating between the two of them, hoping my dad wouldn't say anything racist, hoping that I wasn't going to overcorrect, all of these sort of small calculations, wanting to point to a book that by Peter Wood, Black Majority, a spectacular book, wanting to point to it and realizing it wasn't because I wanted to talk about it, but just to show that, like, hey, I'm cooler than my dad or whatever. And so there's all this, even when we're really trying to do better, there's all of these complicated triangulations that we're making subjectively in our lives all the time around whiteness. And I realized no one, for all of the work on whiteness, no one had really written about that. There's a lot of corporate training manual kind of things. And you could feel like you're getting called to the principal's office. And there's a lot of, angry and aggrieved sort of elegies, from future fascists and all kinds of stuff like that. But there's nothing to talk to. You're right that it's to people our age in some ways, but it's also to our kids, the kids of people our age, and especially the kids of the right-wingers. All the sex and drugs and drinking and smoking and stuff, I want them to sneak it around to each other rather than feel like it's homework.
That's great. That's really great. I think that that was obviously an intent of yours, and it seems like it's part of what you'll be doing with the book tour and working with kind of the quote former racist types of folks who are really good at diagnosing how people get pulled into white supremacist groups, young people especially. You actually kind of witnessed that with a friend of yours growing up. And I know that this book is kind of a message to those who are vulnerable now. I mean, it's the kind of book that if we had a legitimate anti-terrorist, white supremacist terrorist, law enforcement agencies, they would want to use as a playbook of sorts. Tell me about, first in the book. Am I right about that? That you're hoping that this will create a certain awareness among those who are vulnerable to joining the new Klan?
Yeah, that's absolutely the book really began, the idea of it, with the Mother Emanuel massacre in Charleston. Dylan Roof grew up 10 miles from where I did. And, his haircut was like the same haircut I had when I was a little kid. And so it felt...
I'm so sorry.
The movie wasn't out yet, but it felt almost like that movie Us, the Jordan Peele movie, where part of you gets left behind and becomes this monster. And all the stuff that I had repressed. And, when I started to look at how he had become radicalized, after Trayvon Martin, he was wondering about race, and he went online and looked, and all he found were the racists. And the Conservative Citizens Council, which is very much like, and I thought of my friend Glenn in the book, this was 88, and we were hanging out, shooting the shit, smoking cigarettes on the roof, and he suddenly pulls out a pamphlet from David Duke, former Klansperson running for president that year, had run for governor in Louisiana. And he had an organization called National Association for the Advancement of White People. And so Glenn hands me this pamphlet, and I didn't have a good argument to make with him at that time. I didn't know how to talk about it, but I knew it felt wrong, but I didn't know how to. And I remained friends with him after that. We went off with our girlfriends that night. I hung out with him later, and it ended up causing harm to, he ended up fighting with a black kid that I used to skate with. And
yeah, that was a crazy story. That I read that part already, and it's just really heartbreaking. Go ahead.
So, I think, how was I so stupid not to have any tools to be able to talk to him either? And so, I want the kid like him or like Dylan Roof, when they go online and are like, what's going on in the world? And they look that there's something else that they can find, and maybe something that they'll want to sneak and read. And then also for the kid who was like me, who didn't know what any of this meant, and occasionally it would pop up. But what you wanted was the moment to pass as quickly as possible, so you didn't have to think about it again. Just, okay, now I don't, because whiteness is the ability to not think about race. And that's how it is for most of our lives. And then we get in these moments where we have to think about it, and we get really uncomfortable.
We get really uncomfortable. And what is your advice about what we should do in that discomfort?
Well, it depends on what kind of situation you're in with the discomfort. So
sure.
One reason white people end up being uncomfortable a lot is when they find themselves in the minority, in a majority black space. And so in that kind of discomfort, I say you need to cultivate it. You need to, because when you're the only white person in a room, you notice that you're white real quick. And especially if it's not where you're in a position of power, where you're, a white teacher of black students, and you're aware that you're white, but you also have this power. But when you're in the position where you're just in a minority, you become aware of your whiteness, and you should cultivate that discomfort. When you're in a situation where white people are doing racist things, saying racist shit, talking about whiteness in a way, then I think the way to engage that discomfort is to address them, to have that conversation. Very often now there's so many voices in the world, and there's so many people and so many perspectives that it's really easy to just be like, I just don't have time for, whoever this person is, and I'm out. And, that's a fair enough response. And it's especially a fair response for people of color with dealing with some white person spouting some racist stuff. But we can put ourselves in between that and act as defense in that situation. But it doesn't have to be in a scolding way. We can see it in the way that we're freeing them from this ideology that has captured them. This project ultimately of trying to abolish whiteness, because there's no whiteness without white supremacy. There's no neutral sense of whiteness. It was created as a hierarchy. So it needs to be abolished ultimately. But in that process, it's not that we're losing something. It's a liberatory process. It's liberating not only the people oppressed by white people, but white people ourselves.
Well said, and so well written, too. But I fear that where we're at right now is very far from where we maybe hope to someday be. In the statistic about how a huge percentage of white folks, certainly on the right, that identify as Republicans and so on, identify as being discriminated against because they are white. And even often, I think in polling questions, and who knows how they're asked, even more discriminated against than historically marginalized communities, black and brown folks and others. A huge percentage of white people think they are the victims. What do you have to say to them and about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's precisely also who this book is written for, because that was my dad. That was so many people that I grew up around and have loved and cared about. And that's what I was talking about growing up in Columbia. We were maybe a little ahead in white victim feeling there, because it was, you'd always hear, oh, well, we lost everything back in the war. And these tales of woe and how the Yankee oppressors came and put their boots on us and how everything was taken away. What they mean by everything taken away is the people they thought they owned were freed.
I know. It's like you have a 2-car garage. Yeah. What are you talking about?
Exactly. So I think that part of the problem is that's what whiteness is. In order to cover up the immensity of the crimes, which is hundreds of years of totalitarian rule, where you have a small minority in South Carolina, at least, exerting absolute control to extract absolute value from the vast majority. To cover up something like that, you have to pretend that you're innocent. You have to have this heightened sense of innocence. And that's what is passed on to us. And I finally realized that story I told earlier about the statue of George Washington with the broken cane. Right after Charlottesville, when I was watching the statues, which I covered and still, whenever I talk about, screws up my head at some level. But 2 nights later, I was watching the monuments come down, the Confederate monuments in Baltimore come down. And I realized that all that hatred and violence I'd seen in some ways was because all of these big guys were out there thinking that we were calling their mamas liars.
Wow. That's interesting. Yeah, that's fascinating.
And so it's urgent that we talk to those people who feel victimized by being white, that we show, and because they are victimized, but they're victimized by income inequality. They're victimized by this whole, and my dad was part of that as well. He, right as Reagan, who he loved, came in, he got canned from his job because of all these mergers and, acquisitions and the sort of corporate greed of the 80s. They canned him right after they transferred him. So he lost our house. We lost all of what he was so proud of. And then he became more right wing.
Yeah. And part of that, as you write, I don't know if you did, I didn't see it yet. I'm sure you do, make the connection between all of it, his job loss, his life, his job loss, and someone yelling on AM radio, telling him all of the wrong reasons as to why it happened and making him feel like a victim. Because you do mention that, you got into the car and you heard the radio a lot. So did the radio radicalize your father further based on his own life experience, his job loss, et cetera, giving him the grievance he needed?
Absolutely. He had to travel for work. He ended up working in Charlotte after that. We moved. And so he was on the road a lot. And he was listening to AM radio, was when Limbaugh came around, all of these right-wing talk people, that small little media ecosystem, similarly to the pamphlets that my friends got, has been supplanted by this massive, right-wing media ecosphere, plus all of then the farther right stuff, racist stuff on the web that filters into the Tucker Carlsons and people. And he was fully, part of it was tracing the history of angry white media through the course of my life and how that shaped his psychology and how me then trying to rebel against him shaped my own psychology, and without noticing the underlying similarities and the underlying sense of entitlement and privilege that we both shared.
What do you say when you're in a conversation with someone? This has happened to me a couple of times, and they're a white person. They're vulnerable enough to basically admit, "Hey, I haven't had an easy life. Look at what I've overcome. I mean, it certainly used to happen all the time when people would call my old live radio show, Baynard, where they'd say, I grew up in poverty. My mom was an addict. The things that I had to overcome to build my own, to put myself through school, to build my own business. Nobody gave me a handout. Nobody helped me out. And we need to stop making excuses for these victims. And it's not like I haven't suffered. What do you say to that guy? Because your book is one of the reasons it's so good is because you articulate and illustrate all of your suffering, your dad's suffering, your mom's suffering, your brothers, your families, your grandparents. White people suffer immensely. Nobody is taking that from us, but it seems that there's a certain group of people think that that's the case and that we should just pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. What do you say in that conversation? How do you handle that?
Yeah, that's such a common conversation. And I had a lot of practice on it with my dad because though his family had once been wealthy slavers and stuff, his father wasn't, and they had 6 kids, and he was they were the only white family in the street. So he was always running that line about how he pulled himself up. And, the thing that I think never got through to him, but I think might get through to people more now is that, yeah, that's absolutely right. All of those ways that you're suffering is true. And a lot of that is because of whiteness. If you think about, like, one of the things that made me realize that was writing about when I would get arrested for weed when I was a kid. And back then I naively sort of thought, oh, a victim of the drug war, I understand what the people uprising in LA over Ron King are going through. And I was a skateboarder and fuck the police. And I thought I understood that. And that was wrong. But what I've come to understand since then is I got off immensely easier than any person of color would have gotten for being arrested for the same things than me. But how much better would my life have been if there wouldn't have been a racist drug war at all? If we would have had public transportation, public health care, all of the things that racism has kept us from. Heather McGee's book does a great job at this with looking at the swimming pools. White people would rather not have a pool, fill it in, than share it. Like, we harm ourselves with our own whiteness all the time. And that doesn't mean that we also, within this system, don't have advantages over other people. It's just that it's a shitty system. The way I tried to get my dad with it was, he was a fervent anti-communist, was like, do you think that the people who were party members that you thought, got the benefits and stuff were still ultimately harmed by communism because they also had all of these limitations? And that he sort of got that a little bit, but that was the closest with him. But I do think as we see fewer and fewer resources being used towards the public and more resources being privatized towards wealthy white people, that this argument will be stronger, that it's whiteness that's harming us all.
You are familiar with Jonathan Metzl and his dying of whiteness, I'm sure. I was
just about to mention it. That's exactly what I was thinking of when I was saying that.
For those of us that are, this age, raising kids, you mentioned this already for that generation. What do you hope they get out of this book and your work in general?
I really hope that my niece, looks back and sees me as hopelessly racist in 10 years because things have progressed so much more, that the things that I can't even see that she's seeing, but that this made her feel maybe comfortable enough. I also really want people to understand that, and people our age, and then for the younger people, that we are going to make mistakes. This is just a book that's a series of mistakes that I make, essentially. And too often, men who want to be better or white people who want to be better act like we're perfect when we're not. And so then we avoid having the conversations about mistakes. And then the kids just hold it in and bottle up because they feel like they can't talk about it. And all of this sort of hyping up of the danger of cancel culture is nonsense. But I think that there is the danger of people are afraid because of the way everyone grows up in public and stuff now with social media of making mistakes. And I wanted to put out here's all of the mistakes. And if I can be sure of one thing, it's I'm probably wrong right now. But this is the best I can give the world at this moment, and in hopes of starting a conversation that the young people will see me as utterly retrograde and hopeless, but only because of the conversation that ensued.
Well, your best is more than good enough. It's as good as anything out there. This book is really, really important. It's fascinating, and I hope that everybody goes and gets it and goes and gets several copies and shares them with their friends. I do want to, before I could talk to you about this book forever, but I just want people to get it. Before I let you go, I do want to talk to you about your last book, which you co-wrote with Brandon Soderberg. It's titled, I Got a Monster, The Rise and Fall of America's Most Corrupt Police Squad. You covered the Baltimore Police Department's now infamous gun trace task force. I just talked to your friend D. Watkins a little bit about this. He wrote the third episode of We Own This City, the new HBO series with David Simon. But you wrote this book about this same police squad. And my main question to you is, if listeners have asked me about this since I did the interview with D, and I mentioned that show, they said, Are all police departments like that? And I said, I think they're different. I don't know. I mean, but I've heard nightmares about, obviously, LAPD, Chicago PD and their torture chambers and their black sites, obviously NYPD. And I wonder, the America's most corrupt police squad, is that hyperbolic, or aren't they all, how do you feel about generalizing about law enforcement and the corruption and the crimes that they commit today in this day and age?
Yeah, it's a great question. The way, sometimes with the title, we fought to get I Got a Monster was an important title for us to have, which was what the main Sergeant Wayne Jenkins would say when he found a drug dealer big enough to rob, to just break into his house and rob instead of, and maybe arrest. But it also was like Oedipus saying, I'm going to find the guy who killed the king. And, there's all these double meanings. So we really wanted that. But so we didn't have as much choice in the subtitle. One thing we didn't like is we wanted to say North America, because also, just the generalizing of that. But the way we justified the most corrupt was everyone in the unit was corrupt separately and in their own ways, with their own sphere of drug dealers, their own. But I think what we're seeing now, what really happened with this, and one of the things that the show really sort of skirted on but didn't address, is the way that this was a response to the uprising, what the Gun Trace Task Force was doing. And what it was essentially was a counterinsurgency unit. And they were going around and destroying the energy that came up after the uprising, after the death of Freddie Gray, and creating a tremendous amount of crime. And I think we're seeing this around the country as we've had this whiplash speed backlash from 2020 with people saying defund the police, to now we're just, everyone is worshiping police again, ready to lock everyone up. And I think what people don't realize is the extent to which police cause crime, not cause it by slowing down. And that means, so what they would do is they would rob up to 50 people a night, making 50 unconstitutional stops. When you're robbing drug dealers like that, they then have to go back and explain to someone what happened to the money. Oh, the police got me. They didn't give me any paper. They don't have one guy. They robbed $10,000 from him and arrested him. And then he was followed from court by other guys and was killed. And that happened far too often. And I think is happening around the country, that, the fancy sociological word is criminogenic, that we're starting to see. And this book really shows in really concrete detail the ways that police cause rather than stop crime.
Really important book. Very important issue, and I think that your work is invaluable. I'm super excited to have met you and had you on the show, and look forward to continuing to talk to you about these issues that are playing out each and every day all over this country in so many different ways. And that's it. I don't want to take up too much more of your time, except for the next time when I get to talk to you, because this book is really, both your book and your friend D. Watkins. I read a lot of books for this job, which I love. And I got to say, both your books have really impacted me and a lot of listeners. Dee's book, and I'm sure yours will as well. And so thank you very much for talking.
Thanks so much. And thanks for having me. And I'll be back anytime. Love the show.
And there you go. Baynard Woods, what did you think of him? Go get the book Inheritance. Follow him on Twitter. Let him know that you heard him here. He was a first-timer here on Stand Up, and it would mean a lot and go a long way if you let him know that you heard him here on the show. Right now on Twitter, go get the book as well. And very much thank both my guests, Maura, Quint, and Baynard Woods, and you for listening. Tell your friends. Give a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts. That means a lot. And sign up for a paid subscription, because I can't do this show without your support. That is for sure. Need the subscriptions to keep it going? Sign up now. StandUpWithPete.com. That's all the time I've got for you today. I will be back here tomorrow with 2 more excellent guests that we can learn a lot from. Maybe you. Email me who you want to be on, who you want me to have on. Maybe you should be on. standuppwithpete@gmail.com. And John Carroll, who's been on before, singer, songwriter, Emmy Award winner. He sings us out as he always does. I love you guys. Be the change that you want to see in the world, and I'll talk to you right here tomorrow.
Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know us right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. We got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. We got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Oh, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, to make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up. You got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.